Hello everyone, welcome to the CFA program exam preparation webinar coming from Fitch Learning here in London. My name is Peter Menzies and I'm one of the CFA program financial trainers, and thank you for joining me this afternoon as we discuss the last minute top tips for the CFA program exam. Essentially, as we know guys, it's a month exactly now, isn't it, away? So I hope that you'll find this next this webinar session to be useful in terms of things which maybe you knew already, but maybe just enhanced knowledge, maybe things you didn't know, to make sure you get the best out of this last month, which of course is so important for good performance. So let's have a look at what the agenda is. Let's see what the key agenda for ourselves. Really to do with, firstly, Fitch Learning, what generally you can expect from us if you were to want to use any of our products to assist you in your last month. I'll explain what's available and you can see about that. But also, of course, the exam format as well. Because if you haven't been to the exam before, then obviously it's all a new experience. And, I myself, as a CFA charter holder, I can certainly remember the first time I pitched up to the level 1 exam. I wish I knew certain things beforehand to really help me get the best out of the process. So hopefully I can share some of that information with you. And then we'll have a look at the last minute top tips, basically 10 key tips. And it starts with things like the calculator, strategy for the exam, as you can see, formulae which you must know, but also be wary of things that you don't need to know. And generally these are tips on preparing for the exam day, because of course it's so stressful, but you have to maximize, of course, your time and be efficient as possible. We've also got some practice exam questions just to see what kind of things we can expect on the day. Right, so everybody, I hope that's clear. That's our agenda coming up. Now, the little bit of background here. Fitch Learning essentially has almost 20 years of experience helping delegates, or candidates, should I say, through their CFA program studies. We train thousands of candidates every year, as you can see. So let's say that we have a lot of experience of this exam, and our trainers are all essentially, fully qualified charter holders who've been, training for many years, had worked in finance beforehand, also some teaching beforehand, and now bring it all together as a CFA trainer. So when we compile our questions, we really think about what we had challenges with as students ourselves. Try to write material which we know will be helpful, and questions that we know generally do come up. And of course, so after so many years, we get feedback, of course, from our audience to say, yes, this generally is what is important. Now, you can choose from a range of flexible classroom and online options. I mean, obviously, if you're physically not able to come to a classroom, to be aware, all our material is available as an online option, including recordings of classes and question bank and mock exams. So you can do everything you need to from wherever you are studying. Yes, you get a personalized learning experience. Now, what that means is when you log on or register for the exam process with us, you'd always be able to see certain key dates in your diary, which is based upon when you started your study experience. So everything is tailored to that. And our online question portal, online study portal, is adaptive, which means that on areas which you are struggling, you'll be essentially directed to do more learning in that area before, of course, you move on to anything else. But if you're actually acing through areas very easily, then we're going to have the online portal push you on to other topics. Because as you'll probably appreciate, the exam is about, especially level 1, I should say, is about covering a range of topics to a sufficient degree of accuracy, not to be an expert in just one or two areas. Right? You've got to have a good range of knowledge. So cognition really helps that happen. And of course, really, now in the last month, of course, I'm sure you've done a lot of learning anyway, and so consolidating your knowledge is what's important. So we have online again and classroom available review packages. Now, review packages are basically mock exams, final sort of summaries, basically mind maps, which basically just bring it all together, final countdown, summary of formulas. So it's all very good things for when you've done, of course, lots of study, but you now want something to bring it together quickly because, of course, there's not much time left. Okay, so remember that's what we can expect. And let's say cognition, study anytime, anywhere. I mean, on a desktop if that's what you want to do, or we do have a mobile app as well for iOS, Android, and all that. So you have access to the material, whatever medium you're using, and you'll receive guidance as you go through the topics. So you know exactly what to study, and of course, like I say, key dates when to have finished that area, because obviously there's so much that you can get bogged down very easily and effectively lose timing in your study process. So cognition keeps pushing you on. And if you were to, of course, get into difficulty, then you get the support you need from our expert instructor team. And I say expert only because we've done this for so many years. I mean, it's not about being smart or whatever. It's about having been through it and done it a lot. And then you start to get the idea, okay, these are areas which we know will be challenging, so we're ready to answer those questions. It's a global faculty, and it's a large full-time faculty. So you've got many trainers available to you at any time of the day through the online help desk. Okay, everyone. So a few screenshots there of cognition. Obviously, the idea is topics are broken down really into atoms with cognition, so that you can, should we say, in a nice bite-sized way, maybe watch a 5-minute video, do a short burst of 5 questions, and hopefully happy with that little one topic, or should I say one atom, and move on to the next one. And the group of atoms will form something under some sort of learning outcome statement, which actually the exam is to be written towards. We break it down into smaller chunks, though, so that you can learn quickly what you need, and then build up, of course, to a learning outcome statement, which will be an exam question basis, and then, of course, a group of them in readings, which are basically chapters, so reading questions, and study session questions, which are then for a group of readings. So this is the sort of thing, atomizing your learning so that you can have bite-sized, ready material you can go at even when you don't have much time. Okay, so guys, getting ready for the level 1 exam, of course, we say make use of all the resources available to you, clearly. Now, if you're interested in coming to a classroom review session, what basically that entails is the trainer will give you a set of questions and supporting material to look at so that you can do time question practice, and then you'll be able to have feedback from the trainer as what was important here, how could you solve this, how could else you solve this, what are the pitfalls. So it's a nice sort of way to get exam ready, and maybe learn things you didn't already know as well. And we have those courses available. You can see, guys, these locations there. So if that is suitable, then of course you can get in touch. I'll give you the details of who you can contact, and maybe he's looking to book yourself on to one of those courses. But if you can't come to any of those locations, then that's okay, because the online review tab, which is now available from Fitch Learning, will have all of the questions that we would go through in the classroom. And it also has, you can see here, questions, workshops, so basically recordings of difficult areas gone through carefully with a trainer, videos of the entire material, right? Everything is recorded, every topic, every reading. Mock exams, and that would be, multiple mocks, say 5 mock exams are available there, and live webcasts of classroom courses. I mean, that's of course if you are, starting way back when, and you want to say, well, I can't attend any classroom, but can I watch something online? And yes, you can, an actual classroom session. Now, on the other hand, if you just want to have access to final mock exams, then that is available online. These are, as I say, exam standard, written by us, based upon what we think are the most important areas. So it'll be basically, as you may know, it's a 6-hour is an exam. So basically, each exam is 2 lots of 120 questions, a 6-hour paper in total of 240 questions, and you can do that online. You can print them out as well, of course, to really, debrief them carefully. And if you want to come to a classroom session in a Fitch Learning office, then there are dates in May where you could, for example, come to a London Fitch Learning headquarters and just basically sit one of the mock exams online. You can actually sit it as a proctored exam. So you get the experience of, everybody in one place doing an exam under time pressure, and of course it's a bit more stressful that way. Using an HB pencil, right? Using a HB pencil, using a Scantron sheet to fill in the ovals A, B, or C, and having that gone away and scanned by computer. So, if you don't scan if you don't color in the ovals or shade the ovals correctly, then the computer won't scan it properly. You won't get the mark. So, little things which make, of course, the actual exam process a bit more stressful than, of course, just sitting at home and doing it yourself. Okay. So if you want to just get more information, any of that, there's the link down there at fitchexamprep.com for more information. Okay, and as if, as you weren't already aware, the exam is 15th of June, generally, Saturday. 15th of June is the main date anyway. And it will be 2 papers, morning and afternoon, which is 3 hours per paper. So 9 till 12 and then 2 till 5. Now, every topic is covered in the morning and afternoon session. So basically self-contained 3-hour papers in the correct weighting. I'll show the weightings coming up, but everything in the correct weighting. And everything in order. I'm sure you knew this. Everything is actually ordered topics. So the first day session is on ethics. So therefore the first, question batch will be on ethics. The second, day session is on quants. So therefore the next section in the exam will be on quants, and so forth. So you can do your best section first, if you like, and leave your worst to the end. Now, the exam does have 240, therefore, questions in total. Multiple choice A to C, no negative marking. And everything is standalone. So, you just do one question at a time. If you make a mistake on one, it does not, make the next question a follow one also wrong. So that's good. You have one at a time, isolated, independent questions. But that does mean that they will cover a vast range of material, of course, the morning and afternoon. So again, guys, focus on the quantity that you've covered there. Quality is important, no doubt, but if you specialize in one or few areas, or I'll leave a few topics out, you'll get burnt because those topics will come up and you won't be able to answer them at all. So you just have to have some knowledge across every topic. Now, your performance is judged overall on the 240 questions. So it's not as if you have to pass the morning and afternoon individually. You just have to have a high enough total score out of 240. Okay, so here we go. Last minute top tips. First thing, know all the relevant functions on the CFA program exam calculator. Now, most candidates use the Texas Instruments BA2 Plus or BA2 Plus Professional, but you might also be using the HP 12C calculator. I mean, whichever one you're using, guys. I'm just saying, you have the exam calculator, which of course you have to bring yourself to the exam. They won't provide any calculators to you. Your responsibility to bring that to the exam. Obviously, be careful. Obviously, not be careful. Just make sure either you have spare batteries or you have a spare calculator, just in case something goes wrong and it breaks, it dies on you, and you don't have anything else to use. I mean, you can't borrow materials, so please do, take a spare calculator just in case. So there's just a reminder, guys, know all the relevant functions on that calculator, including things like the time value of money. So TVM buttons, guys, of course, things like the N and the IY and the present value and your payment button, of course, and the future value. So, basically, of course, you're doing any compounding or discounting. And remember, declare that you just press second FV on the calculator. ICONV, guys, ICONV is for interest rate conversion. So that's when you want to go from a nominal rate to an effective rate, or back again. Right, so the useful function iconv, second button, number 2 on the Texas calculator if you do want to access that one. Data and statistics, well guys, that's going to be basically anything to do with standard deviation and variance and such. So second, number 7 will give you access to the data sheet. You can put your X entries in, right, X1s and X2s and so forth. It'll prompt you to put data in. But yes, there'll be X entries, there'll also be Y entries as well. But if you check it, you can go to the stats function under second 8. There you'll see that it should be in one variable mode. And so really the Y entries can be thought of as frequencies and the X entries as the actual data. But you can work out mean and variance and standard deviation and so forth from that. NPV and IRR, so guys, we're doing our corporate finance material, or you're doing some kind of, money-weighted return of a fund, then you're going to have to put cash flows in, aren't you, of those projects. So cash flow function, and yes, CF, and then you're putting, for example, cash flow at time 0 is what, cash flow at time 1 is what, and you're pressing the down arrows and also pressing the enter buttons when you want to scroll between those. Amortization, typically then, of course, for accounting, you want to work out the ending value of an amortized loan, or indeed the interest for that year, or the principal amortized, of course. So you press the second button and the PV button, and that's going to give you access to amortization function. Remember, you have to state, though, what is the P1 and the P2. P1 is when do you want to start your analysis, and P2 is when you want to end your analysis. So you have to give the calculator a total time frame to analyze. And break-even is used in corporate finance when looking at the, the break-even quantity of sales, the operating break-even quantity of sales, and there you press second number 6, and you get access to the break-even function. And actually there, you just put in your fixed cost, obviously a key thing, fixed cost, variable cost, price. And when you're solving for quantity, remember to put Q as 0. Okay, so it's a bit of a, reminder really, okay? You need to be able to use the calculator efficiently. That's going to save you so much valuable time. Okay, there's a link, guys, there. Please note, it's free to just access this exam prep. Free set resources, and you can view the calculator guide video, which is just nice to see in case you miss something. Why don't you just watch that and just check all of the key functions of the calculator. Also how to clear it and memory and stuff like that. Everything useful. Okay, tip number 2 is question practice. You, of course, guys, are going to have now this next month really thinking about doing all the key questions which are of exam standard. And in that time you'll know, well, what's your time allocation? How much are you giving to each area? Are you overdoing it? Are you rushing stuff? So you've got to give your time allocation right. Now, question practice. Now, of course, the exam is 180 minutes basically for 120 questions. So it works out to 1.5 minutes a question, doesn't it? So when you're going through your mocks, of course, you're timing yourself and seeing that you're getting through quickly. But remember, read the requirement first, as in read the question. What is it asking? Is it a calculation? Is it an analysis? Don't get bogged down in what they call time track questions. Okay, ones which, I would say a time track question, for example, could just be a big ethics, question. Lots of writing, lots of paragraphs, and you're thinking, right, oh dear. Best thing, read the answers first. What is it you want me to analyze from this section, from this ethics question? And then when I read the ethics paragraphs, I will be looking for points which lead me to one of the answers. As opposed to getting too bogged, sort of into the story of it and saying, oh, this is interesting. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, no. What do you want me to do here? I'll just focus on that. Now, of course, you can always move on to a question, move on and leave it until the end if you need to. Let's say it's all ordered material. And it's all worth one mark as well. So nothing deserves more time than it needs to be, right? Every question deserves its 1.5 minutes, not more, not less. And I know that some questions will take more than 1.5 minutes when you're doing like a longer calculation. What I mean is, when you know you're just wasting time on a question, just leave it. Here's an example, though, of ways to use the calculator efficiently. This guy's the topic of yield measures for fixed-rate bonds. So the topic here really is to compare the yield to maturity when bonds have different periodicities. Yeah, annual yields, everybody here, called the annual percentage rate, or APR. As you can see, it's a stated rate, and it is a simply annualized. It is a simply annualized yield to maturity. So, for example, a periodic semi-yield is doubled, right? A quarterly yield is times 4. But we want to say comparable. Well, guys, we want to see that the effective rate is the same. When we're comparing, the logic is, can you give me APRs which are equivalent because they give me the same effective return? I'm sure, guys, if you know, effective return just means compound return. So there's a formula which shows us that, of course, how do you convert an APR firstly to an effective rate? Well, the APR needs to be divided by the number of periods. So let's say M periods, divide the APR by M to work out the periodic rate, right? What's the periodic rate? Is like APR M over M. Or if you have a bond which pays for N periods, then of course you're dividing it by then N, isn't it? So that then becomes the periodic rate as well. So basically, take the periodic rates, and we're going to equate, not the periodic rates, we're going to equate the effective rate. So the effective rate would be then, of course, by compounding that rate to the number of periods in the year. Yeah, the number of annual periods, in this case M, or in the other case N. Yeah, so that's just our formula saying, what we're really doing is saying that you have to have the same effective return, and therefore the, should we say, the APRs in the first place were comparable. Okay, so in the topic there, a 6% bond, a 6% bond, sorry, a 4% bond has been paying over the 6 years, yes, semi-annual payments priced at 103.21 per 100 par value. Now, we check out, guys, the periodicity is semi-annual, fine, so 2 periods a year. Now, the bond's yield to maturity has been quoted on a semi-annual bond yield basis at 3.404%. Anybody who wants to just double check where that number's come from, that is just onto your calculator, so TVM buttons. You just check, guys, here. We need to, of course, input the number of periods, so 12N. We need to know what the price of the bond is. Well, it's given as 103.21. You can make that a negative. Payments, right, half of 4, so 2 every 6 months. And, of course, the face value is 100. You log all that in, guys, there. You put all your numbers in, and then you compute the IY. Now, the IY will not come out as 3.404%. You can just double check. The IY comes out as 1.702. Yeah? Which obviously is because that's a semi-annual yield. But as we said, when you compute an APR, this is giving us an APR. We're going to have to double this because that's the idea. So times 2, and we then get, as you can see, 3.404%. Now, that, therefore, everybody, is APR for 2 periods a year. Okay. A trader has been asked to convert this to a monthly periodicity, which means, what is the APR on a monthly bond which would give me the same overall, effective return as this semi-bond? And that's just saying, if I'm going to look at any monthly paying bonds, that is the equivalent APR I'm looking for. Otherwise, if it's lower, I won't buy it, right? I need to see at least that number from a monthly bond, then it's giving me the same effective return. That's the idea. Now, you could do and try to follow the formula here and say, well, let me first compound this APR and do like an effective return, and then once I work the effective return, I'll take the 12th root of it, and then I'll multiply by 12. And that's possible. You can do that, but it takes at least 2-3 minutes. Much easier just to do this. So second, guys, now press the number 2. Second 2 is for the interest rate conversion, ICONV. Okay. Now, in this one, we're saying the nominal rate is equal. The nominal rate is equal to 3.404%, right? So enter. 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 And then the up arrow of compounding periods was 2, because it was, of course, a semi-bond. So 2, enter. Up arrow again. Effective rate, well, I want the effective rate, so I'll press compute. And I believe we get 3.433. Because that is actually the effective return on your semi-annual bond. All right, now what? Well, we actually want to convert this to a monthly paying bond. So we'll go back down now to compounding periods and say if this was to pay 12 times a year, enter. Okay, let's go now to the nominal rate and say what would be the equivalent APR. Give me nom-compute. Can we see where this comes to 3.38? So 3.38% is basically the equivalent APR 12. Okay? APR 2 of 3.4% roughly, equivalent APR for 12 periods a year would be 3.38. And the reason why it's smaller is because, of course, if you're paying more frequently, the nominal rate doesn't have to be as big to give you the same effective return, because you get more compounding benefits. So, see, guys, that is probably the most efficient way to solve that one. Okay, hope that was all right. Now, of course, I think, as you probably know, as one of the biggest topic areas in the course is accounting. Alongside ethics, actually, it's a joint biggest topic. So, you'll probably have spent quite a bit of time here. Now, the accounting analysis is from the perspective of international standards. But of course, once in a while, we say there can be some discrepancies with US standards, US GAAP. So what, in fact, is the key differences between the two? That's often a very key question. So let's have a look at an example. This quite big now, guys, cash flow categories. Okay, cash flow. Do you remember this? This is where US GAAP, IFRS differ on maybe where you place certain items. So the question is, where would you look for the following items in a US GAAP cash flow statement or an IFRS cash flow statement? Okay, so let's see if we can jog our memory here. Now, US GAAP, just saying strict criteria. Strict in terms of where things go. There's only one right answer. Okay? So the logic really is, if an item pertains to operating activity, then it should, of course, go in the operating cash flow section. And how do we know it's operating related? Is because if it's revenue related, basically. So if there's an equivalent sort of accruals item in the income statement, then the cash flow related item should be in the operating section of the cash flow. So, for example, interest paid is, of course, the cash equivalent of interest expense. So US GAAP would think of that as definitely CFO. Interest received means, of course, investment income, right? Investment income, which is typically operating income. It's certainly on the income statement. So that would be CFO as well. Now, dividend income, just to do that one, of course, is also investment income. So that would be CFO also. But what about dividends paid? Is dividends paid part of the income statement? No. Dividends are paid out of reserves once the company, of course, has, essentially tallied up its profits for the year. So it's paid out of reserves. In any case, it's not operating related. It is financing related. So it goes into financing. Okay, that's a really odd one out, isn't it? But not really odd when you think about why, and the logic of it. Now, on the other hand, IFRS gives IFRS companies a choice. So the international standards say that companies can basically choose one or the other. There are two to choose from. But once you choose a category, you typically keep it there per item. Yes? Now, the main point, guys, is that we can have all of the categories, okay? We can have all of the categories that US GAAP has. That's the thing to remember. Whatever US GAAP does, IFRS company can do the same. But, as you can see, CFO, CFO, CFF, CFO. But if you think about it, they say interest paid, yes, it is an operating item, but you might also say, isn't it related to my debt? So it's financing as well. So it could be arguably CFF. Interest received, of course, is operating, I suppose, but isn't also based upon your investments. So surely it could also be under investing cash. And for dividends paid, yes, agreed it's a reserve payment, but it's paid out of profits, and profits are from your trading operations, so it could be CFO. And finally, yes, dividends received are indeed operating income, I suppose, but they are, of course, also because you're investing, so sure that could also be CFI. So guys, you can see there the choice. CFO is basically an option for all of these items, or CFF, CFI, depending on the nature of the item. Always good to have that, that sort of analysis. Now, a bit more analysis. Let's try, everybody here. An analyst has gathered the following information about a company. This is the sort of time trap I was talking about earlier. You can spend overly long looking at all the little numbers and maybe tallying things up in your head. But what I'll do, I'll just look at the question first. Under US GAAP, what is the cash flow from financing? Okay, now of course US GAAP, everybody we've just mentioned, does have some strict rules about what goes where, but it's asking for CFF, US GAAP. Okay, so now in the exam I would have a look and see anything which is CFF, I'll just take it out. So firstly I see dividends paid. Give a tick on that one. So yes, CFF related, because of course you just said US GAAP only allows it there. Common stock issued, well, basically financing related is the issuance of bonds and shares. That's another CFF item, I need that one. Equipment purchased, no. Okay, that one is CFI, my guys, CapEx, so no, I don't need to look at that. Bonds issued, yes, right, that is, of course, financing. Fixed assets sold, again, fixed assets I switch off, that's a CFI item, don't need it. Account receivable, that's operating, don't need that. Inventory, CFO. Accounts payable, CFO. And finally, wage payable, CFO. We could look at it and say, oh, what's the impact of those cash flows? But I don't need them. I just go straight to what I need. I'll highlight my numbers. Dividends paid, please. Common stock issued. And bonds issued. Everything else is irrelevant for this. And we can just write, therefore, that CFF okay, so just saying common stock issued, bond issued, and indeed subtract, of course, the dividends paid. Obviously, that's an outflow. So, yeah, because that's okay, just putting our numbers here, 40 for the common stock, bonds issued 160, take off the 60, and I guess that's 140, yes? Okay, see what I mean? Not getting too bogged down. Obviously, we could try to look at the details. Fixed assets sold for 60. That's cash flow in for CFI. The cost was 200, depreciation 140. That's the net book value 60. That means there's no profit on sale. But, irrelevant. The question doesn't even look at that. Okay. Make sure you know, guys, tip number 3, make sure you know how a topic will be tested. This means, what is the command word that's used in the learning income statement? Learning outcome statements will say things like, oh, you must calculate, you must explain, you must interpret. Now, if they say interpret, if they say explain, then we can expect some kind of narrative question. Of course, if they say calculate, then we know some numbers to do. And, you can be sometimes come unstuck by learning formulas they don't really need to learn because it's not a calculative assessment. In fact, that's the next tip. Therefore, don't waste time on learning formulae that you will not be tested on. An example which springs to mind is the formulas for skew and kurtosis in quants. They're quite full-on formulas, and they're just there to show you the sign of skew can be negative because it's like raised to the power 3 formula, and kurtosis can't be negative because it's raised to the power 4 formula. They show you the formulas just to give you that understanding. They don't actually want you to calculate anything. So don't waste your time learning that. Just know the command word is you must be able to explain and interpret skew and kurtosis. And here, guys, just a list really of key formulae that, yes, I'd expect that you hopefully would know. Okay, so just get a checklist, guys, there. So portfolio standard deviation. They're just saying here, for example, you can see a formula like W1 squared, W2 squared. So you square your weightings, don't you? You multiply by individual variances, be careful, and then you add on the covariance of the two assets. So you need the covariance term and the variance term. Standard errors, again, remember that is to do with looking at the division of sigma by root n, or if you don't have that, you use S. Sharp, trainer, Jensen's alpha, so guys, things like that. The return of the portfolio minus the risk-free rate divided by, right? So all of this, hopefully guys you've seen before, but sharp, right, versus trainer. The only difference between the two is really the measure of risk. Is it standard deviation of the portfolio or is it beta of the portfolio? And Jensen's alpha is just the excess to cap M, which actually is down here. RF, right, plus beta times RM minus RF. So Jensen's alpha is return the portfolio minus cap M, minus the cap M required. Yes, beta, correlation coefficient, covariance. You do need to know that the, if we look back here, guys, covariance, of course, can be calculated as correlation times the standard deviation, sigma 1, for example, times sigma 2. So obviously working out covariance from correlation, and of course back again as well, obviously if you divide covariance by the standard deviations, obviously you will get correlation that way. Yeah, so a bit back and forth. We need to be able to go back and forth on that. Beta would be covariance basically with the market divided by variance of the market. Bond durations, yes, Macaulay, modified, convexity approximations. I'll just say, guys, that generally, of course, remember that the reason for using approximations in level 1 is because we don't need to do any calculus. There's no calculus. So to avoid the calculus, remember, especially modified duration, just take that for a second, approx mod, the way you do it is you assumingly shock interest rates down and back up again, and you see what the reaction in the bond is, and then you say, I'll take an average of that reaction, and I'll also base it on the yield that I've used. So 2 times V0, the initial value of the bond, and times change in Y. That's approx mod, and it does come up. And then, of course, Macaulay would just be adjusting that by the yield. So modified duration to Macaulay is to multiply by 1 plus the yield. That's a simple adjustment. Yeah, dividend discount models, guys, that's the Gordon's growth model. GGM, basically we use GGM in level 1 where the price of the share is based upon the future dividend, D1 over R minus G. And WACC, of course, is just be wary, of course, that with that you'll have the weighting, of course, to debt. But when it comes to cost of debt, then we do need to take the tax effect into, because, of course, interest is tax deductible. And then the weighting of equity, of course, equity does not have any tax deductions. You could also have preference shares as well. Accounting ratios, finally, profitability, turnover, activity. I mean, just to give an example, of course, ROE is accounting analysis, because that's DuPont decomposition of ROE. So we say that's based upon the earnings after tax versus your sales. So what kind of margins, what kind of profitability you're making, right? Margins multiplied by your turnover. So asset to sales multiplied by your leverage, which is, of course, then your asset to equity. Now that is the DuPont decomposition, but of course they love to analyze, well, can you see maybe the margins are getting better for a company, but it's, the turnover is getting worse, so the ratio is still going down, or maybe something, some other combination. They love that. So definitely, guys, spend some time on your DuPont analysis, because that brings all your ratio knowledge together anyway. Okay, so there's a bit of a quick stop, really, looking at key formulae. Hopefully this is all familiar to you. You know what we're talking about. This does come up. You do need to learn these formulas. Top tip, do not focus on your favorite topics at the expense of weaker ones. What they mean is don't try to specialize in a few areas. You won't get away with it because they will test everything. Okay, they'll go through all the areas, so you need to get a good enough performance across the board. Make sure you know the weightings. So obviously you can allocate your time accordingly, and hopefully you've already seen that. Let's see those weightings anyway. So everybody, the key ones really, of course, the biggest are ethics and FR&A, accounting analysis. But really, I mean, it's just making sure you know, right? For example, I think derivatives, in my mind, for somebody who's never studied derivatives before, the content is quite challenging, because you have to understand a lot of concepts about value and pricing. And it does take a while to be comfortable with all of the formulas they throw at you. And at the end of the day, the questions aren't particularly complicated, and there's no calculations anyway. So, whatever happens, don't get trapped into spending more than the time deserving on derivatives at the expense of something like, of course, fixed income and equity, which, of course, gives you almost double the value. And also the content is probably even easier, especially equity. Yeah, ethics is not an easy topic. It is 15%. It does take a long time to master. So hopefully, guys, you've been able to go through ethics a few times already. You'll know what I mean. That, of course, the questions can be very long, and not always is it like a common sense solution. You've really got to be sharp as to the little nuances and tricks they use to lead you to a certain answer. Accounting, of course, takes its own time as well. Do not underestimate ethics. There we go. Practice every question you can find, especially, guys, the questions from the CFA Institute. As you know, you have access to various e-books, online material, but the CFA Institute Volume 1 book has lots and lots of ethics examples, because it's study session 1. I think you'll find it in reading 3, okay? Reading 3 is application of the standards. There are 7 standards, and you really have to be on top of those case studies and scenarios they give you, because your exam is based upon those. So you absolutely should, be familiar, especially CFA Institute. Fitch Learning gives material as well, but here I would just say, remember, the best place to study ethics is from the CFA Institute material, exactly that. Yes, and for that reason, don't overlook the CFA program books, even at this stage. In my opinion, you've got time to go and have a look, especially at the ethics now, before we get into the last sort of 3 weeks, especially 2 weeks, where you don't look at any books, you just do questions. But you do have time to look at the ethics content, even at this stage, including end of chapter questions. Now, I like the chapter questions because clearly that's nice and thorough. I'm not saying you can do all the chapter questions across all areas, but if there's a topic that you're struggling with, Best way, of course, to master it is to do the chapter questions as well as all of our questions, or anything else you can find. Do as much as possible. Okay, make sure you've got your checklist, guys, ready, because the exam centre, wherever you're going, would expect you to bring all your materials with you, such as an HB pencil, of course a rubber, eraser, the eraser, pencils, the ID, which I suppose passport is, of course, the gold standard. Use your passport, bring your passport. Calculator, right? Bring a spare if you need to. Read the exam centre rules. Of course, what time are you expected to register in the morning? Usually it's going to have to be, by 8:30, for example. If you're not in the room, registered and sitting down, you will not be allowed into the room until after the exam has already started. Same again, 1:30 in the afternoon for a 2 o'clock start. That's the deadline, and the doors of the room are shut. You cannot then get in until after the exam has started. If you're not too sure, check out, guys, the Institute's own link there that explain all of their policies regarding the exam. And I know it seems obvious point, really, but keep your energy levels up during the final few days. I mean, I remember myself, actually, when I was getting ready for the level 1 exam, I mean, absolutely was, doing all the hours I could find, just studying until, say, the Wednesday or Thursday before the Saturday exam. I was absolutely going through it every hour I could find. But I think for the Friday before, especially, I just started to just turn it down a bit. I just took a few more breaks. I said, right, let's stop it and take a break, because I need to have the brain energy, of course, to tackle that Saturday exam. If I'm tired, fatigued, what a shame. What a waste of all of that hard work. So yourself the same, guys. Don't shoot yourself in the foot by pushing it too close to the line. Final few days, ease off, and hopefully your hard work will see you through. Okay, finally, we're already contacting your local learning advisors here. You can see for the regions. If you're interested to use any of our options, please do get in touch and see what's available. And whatever happens, I wish you the very best of luck with your studies, and I hope that you found this webinar useful for you. And see you around, guys. Thanks very much. Bye for now.